Hi everyone, this is Jerry, and this is a game analysis between International Master Leonardo Tristan versus, at the time, International Master Ray Robson. This game was played from the 2009 Pan American Junior Championship, which had Ray Robson winning his first 7 games, drawing his last 2, which earned him his third Grandmaster norm, and consequently the title Grandmaster. Ray was born on October 25th, 1994, which also makes him the world's youngest Grandmaster and also the youngest ever Grandmaster to play for America. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions about this specific video, feel free to leave me a comment on YouTube. And if you have any specific questions about specific chess positions just from any type of game, what you can do is leave me a comment with that game's notation followed up with what your question is, and what I hope to do is answer as many of those type of questions in an ensuing video. So I hope you enjoyed this game analysis. White opens the game with the move pawn to d4. Ray responds with pawn to d5. The bishop to g5, not the most common of second moves in this position. More common is knight to f3, developing a piece, or pawn to c4, striking in the center. Ray responds with pawn to f6, attacking the bishop. The bishop retreats to a square where it still focuses on a central square. Knight to c6 development. Knight to f3 development. Bishop to f5, attacking a pawn and getting outside of the eventual pawn chain after black comes to e6. Pawn to e3, making way for the bishop to develop. Pawn to e6, making way for the bishop to develop. Bishop to e2, making way to castle. Pawn to g5, attacking the bishop, and the bishop has only one safe square, and that of to the g3 square. And take note that each pawn move that you make creates a weakness, and so pawn moves should be given a great deal of consideration. Unlike any other piece on the board, pawns don't have the luxury of moving backwards. Pawn to h5, yet another move, and this is played with the intention of coming to h4 to attack the bishop, and the bishop would then be trapped. So pawn to h3, so in the event of pawn to h4, the bishop can be tucked away on h2. Knight to h6, then Ray decides to develop the knight on the side of the board, but he doesn't intend to keep the knight there for long. He really just goes there to pivot. Eventually he wants to come to f5, where it would attack the bishop. Pawn to c4, striking in the center, and now we see knight to b4 converging on the c2 square. If the knight is allowed to get there, black would be forking the king and rook. So white defends with the knight to a3, guarding c2, and now we have bishop to g6, making way for the knight to come to f5. It's worth noting that if black were to make this bishop move after pawn to c4, if this bishop move were played right now, the knight could come to c3, and this knight to b4 move is not as annoying because the rook can just come to c1 and defend c2. And notice that white is not going out of his way to move the rook here because the rook wants to come here anyway, because after pawn takes on this square, this rook is going to be functioning very well along this c file. And also this knight can be kicked away with the move pawn to a3 at some point. However, this bishop doesn't play here, and we see knight to b4. The knight unfortunately has to come here because the rook cannot make use of coming to this square to guard that square. Knight to a3, and now this knight becomes very annoying. It's difficult to get rid of him. Since this knight is here, the pawn can't move forward and attack the knight. The bishop comes to g6, making way for the knight to come to f5. The knight comes to d2, and now there's pressure against h5. It's only defended once, so black makes a knight move and allows the rook to help out in support of h5 and attacks the bishop. Bishop retreats, and now we see pawn to c6 supporting the center. Knight to b3, and this knight eventually wants to come here to get rid of this very annoying b4 knight. Pawn to a5, knight to c1, again, his intention is to come to d3. King to f7, this may look awkward, but castling is unnecessary at this point in the game. The real point is to just go ahead and eventually connect rooks. After the bishop and queen are off of the back rank, the rooks will be in direct contact with one another. Knight to d3, challenging the b4 knight. Knight to h4, attacking g2. Castles, defends h2, or defends g2. Bishop to d6, trying to eliminate one of the few defenders of the white king. Bishop captures bishop, queen captures bishop, knight captures knight, and now we have pawn captures knight. Two things. The knight is being attacked, and the rook has play along the a file, so that's why this pawn captures knight is played. Knight to c2, and now we have pawn to g4. Ray is just looking to try and create either a half-open file or open files on the king side. So that's what this pawn to g4 move does. It creates potential for pawn exchanges. Pawn to c5, attacking the queen, and notice that white can't go ahead and win a pawn in the following variation. If this variation does come about, the knight comes to f3, and regardless of how the knight is captured, queen to h2 would be delivering checkmate. And even if that checkmate weren't in the air, if that weren't possible, taking a pawn somewhere along this file is probably not a good idea because it allows the rooks to attack the white king that much more easily. So we see pawn to c5 attacking the queen. The queen simply gets out of the way and still stays on this diagonal. Bishop to d3, you might be thinking, well, why not knight captures pawn? I'm thinking that white probably disregarded a move like this because he's moving a piece away from the kingside area, and it's likely to be the case that white is going to need pieces closer to the kingside because there's a lot of pieces that are going to be attacking the white king very soon. So instead of knight captures pawn, we have bishop d3, bishop captures bishop, queen captures bishop, and now rook on a to g8. It's difficult to find better squares for these rooks. King to h1, he sees that the king is probably better placed on the h1 square opposed to the g1 square. Pawn captures pawn, and now if pawn captures pawn here, it's going to lead to mate very quickly. After knight to f3, white can only delay checkmate on h2 for just a move. If the white queen moves here or here, we just take, followed up with queen to h2, and that would be checkmate. So instead of pawn captures pawn, it's just pawn to g3, attacking the knight. The knight simply gets out of the way and keeps pressure on the white position, namely the square g3. Also, we got h4 possibly coming about. The queen is putting pressure on g3, the rook is putting pressure on g3. That's something to focus on if you're playing the white side at this point in the game. Pawn to e4 attacks the knight. Pawn captures pawn, queen captures pawn, and now a tactic comes about. Rook captures pawn. If the rook is captured, the knight recaptures and is forking the king and queen. White does not do this, but instead makes the move rook on a to e1, focusing on the e6 square. Ray avoids this and calculates correctly with the move rook to g2, allows his pawn to be captured with check. The king goes to g7, and unfortunately the best move to make here is rook to e5. Other moves such as pawn to f4 would lose to knight to g3, which would be checkmate. So unfortunately, white is down to rook to e5 being the best defense, and now it's just a matter of winning the game. Pawn captures rook, queen captures knight, pawn captures pawn, allowing the rook and queen to converge on the h2 square, and if the queen is allowed to get to this highlighted square, it would be checkmate. So queen captures pawn, guards h2, attacks the rook. Rook to g4, and now we see pawn to f3. Ray responds with queen to d8, and one of the interesting things about chess is that this move here, queen to d8, might be made by a beginner because the beginner doesn't see maybe that the rook is being attacked. This queen to d8 move might not be made by an intermediate player because the intermediate player does see that the rook is attacked and will move the rook. And then there's the more advanced player who sees that yes, the rook can be captured. However, after seeing deeper with pawn captures pawn, the queen will be caught in a pin and black is going to be winning. So white does not do this, but instead plays rook to g1. Ray follows up with queen to g5, and similar thing would occur if the rook is captured. The queen would still be lost. And so now out of desperation, white makes a move rook to g3, hoping for some sort of perpetual. Apparently there's nothing better in his mind. Actually, any variation would lose at this point. So after rook captures rook, white's hoping for a perpetual. After some checks and blocks, white can check no more, And after knight captures pawn, we see queen to b1 checking the king, and white resigns, because after king to h1, we see mate in the following way: check, 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 queen captures queen, checkmate. So that's all for this video. Hope you got something out of it. Take care. Bye.